Welcome to The Value of One, The Power of All, a podcast created by the Ron Brown Scholar Program. Since 1996, this organization has been investing in the next generation of African American leaders, and this podcast highlights the stories of the people that make this program special. I'm your host, Ray Pryor, 2015 Ron Brown Scholar, and in this fourth season, we're highlighting doctors in our alumni network who have taken their training as physicians beyond just serving patients. From the moments in their personal lives that originally inspired their interest in medicine, to the professional experiences and macro trends that expanded their scope of impact as physicians, we'll peek into the minds of the leaders who are working to improve healthcare from every angle. In this episode, I'm excited to share my conversation with Dr. Joelle Bervell. Joelle is a 2013 Ron Brown captain and a member of Ron Brown's advisory board. He studied cellular and molecular biology at Yale, earned a master's in medical clinical sciences at Boston University, and graduated from med school at Washington State University. His patients know him as Dr. Bervell, but you may already know him online as the medical mythbuster. His social media platforms, at Joelle Bervell, have grown to over 1.5 million followers, over 500 million impressions, and a monthly reach of more than 10 million people. He uses viral digital storytelling to uncover racial disparities, challenge bias in healthcare, and reveal hidden histories in medicine. His work has been featured by the White House, the New York Times, NPR, Good Morning America, The Kelly Clarkson Show, Today.com, Vox, HuffPost, Yahoo News, WebMD, Al Jazeera, Brut Media, and more. He has spoken on leading stages, including at the White House, FDA, Congressional Black Caucus, Clinton Foundation, TED, South by Southwest, Aspen Ideas Festival, the Milken Global Conference, Google, Meta, TikTok, the AMA, and the Association of American Medical Colleges. Joel has also collaborated with global brands, including Google, Neutrogena, Microsoft, Meta, Samsung, Listerine, BET, and the American Medical Association. And his academic work has been published in the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery and the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology. He's been recognized as a Peabody Award winner, Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree, Time 100 creator, a TED Fellow, among many other accolades. He's a fellow podcaster, where he serves as the host of The Dose by the Commonwealth Fund. And he's the creator of The Doctor Is In, a mixed live action and animated TV series on YouTube for kids. Take a listen. So I think it's one thing to decide for somebody like you that you want to be a doctor and all that would require, and the work and the time and the years and the hours. You have certainly decided to excel at that path, as well as many others that aren't directly related to it. Maybe we'll just start with the core of being an MD. When did that start for you, or when did that kind of click as one of the ways that you wanted to make a difference in it?
Absolutely. And Ray, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here. I always joke that my parents said I could be one of three things. I'm a child of immigrants, both my parents from Ghana, West Africa. And there's this joke that when parents come from Africa, that they think of only three jobs essentially that exist: either a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. My dad was an engineer, so I didn't want to do that. Law was something I was interested in. I loved to argue, but really it was medicine that grabbed my heart. I think part of it was having multiple family instances where, as I was growing up, I saw how important the healthcare system was, not just to my family, but to other people, and what happens when the healthcare system fails people. One of my earliest experiences was through my grandma. For much of my childhood, because my parents had immigrated here from Ghana, they were both working while also going to school. And so my grandma was my main caretaker for me and my siblings. I have an older sister, younger brother. And when I was in sixth grade, my parents said, okay, you're old enough, you guys can take care of yourself. Grandma can finally go back to Ghana, where she wanted to be. She was only in the United States to take care of my siblings and I. And quite literally, within about a year, she passed away. We found out she passed away from malaria. And that part of the reason why was because when she got to the clinic, she was told to bring her own materials like tubing. So there's delays in her care. I remember thinking at that point that how could it be that, one, my grandma was gone, two, if she'd stayed in the United States, maybe she would have had the resources to actually get the help that she needed. And then three, how often does this happen to other people? And so when I was in middle school, I really decided on medicine, healthcare, as a path that I wanted to go down to better understand what did it mean to be in the healthcare space? Why were these pain points? Why was the loved one passed away? And as the years passed on, I had multiple other instances from other family members who would be inside the hospital. And so I started thinking about more things like cost of healthcare, where my family was having to struggle to figure out how we're going to pay for this care that my family members needed. And so that was, I think, early on getting this understanding that healthcare isn't equitable for everyone, and that I wanted to be a part of the solution to fixing it.
Yeah, man, we can dedicate this conversation to her in her honor, and I appreciate you sharing your story about her. Uh, it's health is a very fragile thing, and when that hits close to home, or as close as it can hit, besides and including yourself, I can see as a young person that really galvanizing you, and pushing your studies and your mission. And you certainly could do that. You're doing that, and you will go on to serve however many patients that a doctor will serve in their however long their career is, thousands, I'm sure. I don't know what the math is, but you know that you've already in your intern year as a resident reached millions of people with all of your content and all of the things that you're putting together. When did this start? What made you want to start doing this, and when did you realize that this is not just me posting about things that I know and that align with my values, but now this is kind of bigger than just me posting on my personal account? This is kind of a thing in of itself.
Yeah, it's funny because I was talking to my mom about this, and she made this statement where she said, I feel like I always knew you were going to be doing things like this. And she pointed out that even when I was in elementary school, I was the guy that I was like mentoring other people, or I was like wanting to, I was like in fifth grade, we had these peer buddies where we'd be matched up with second graders. So I was doing things like that. When I was in middle school, I ran for a student body treasurer in seventh grade. That was my first like foray into student government. Then became student body president in eighth grade, and then throughout high school, ninth through 12th grade, I was student body president every single year. And so like I've always been someone that wants to educate, lead, to really push the boundaries of the way we think about things. And I think I've always been someone who asks why as well. And so I grew up in this town called Mukilteo. It's about an hour north of Seattle. And if anyone's familiar with Seattle, there's not like a lot of black folk out here. And so I was always one of the only black people in my classes, whether it was middle school or high school. I remember in my school of 2,400 students in high school, I was one of like 10 black students, one of the other students being my brother. And so I learned really early on to understand and like sit in my own identity and find definition of who I was as an individual, and to push back against what other people thought about what that identity meant. I think one of the best ways to exemplify that was through the ways that people would say things like that I'm in quote unquote Oreo. I think some people listening may have heard that I'm black on the outside, but act white on the inside, whatever that meant. And I remember learning really early on to ask why. What does that mean? Why are you saying it in that way? And the more I asked people why, I'd say, okay, why do you think I'm acting white, quote unquote? They'd say things like, oh, well, you're student body president, you're in all AP classes, you are in honor society, you do debate. And I'd ask them, why is that something that you think only a white person can do? And they'd say, oh, that's not what I mean. But once you dove deeper, that's really what they were trying to say. And so I've always had this like desire to ask why, to dive to deeper questions, and to really understand my own, like, what does race mean in the United States? When I applied to college, I went to Yale for undergrad. I wrote my essay about what it meant to be black versus African American, like these really complex ideas. I look back at that essay as like honestly the start of my thinking about how I wanted to think about race. The way I brought it over into medicine, though, was when I got to college and I started really diving more into molecular biology. So I was a molecular cellular developmental biology major, say that 4 times fast. And I loved it because we were diving into what do cells mean and how does the genome work and what are SNFs and all these like complex terms. And I won't lie, I was not good. I was not very good at medicine. I was always more naturally on the liberal arts side of things than the hard sciences side. And so I loved taking classes like media and medicine and understanding how these connections were made between science and people like the Surgeon General, and actually getting that information out to the public. So in college, I really started to form like my understanding of how does the world around us work? Yes, it's important to understand the science, but how does this actually manifest in the way that's actually being presented? And I think media and medicine was a huge class for that. Another class was bioethics and law. And so understanding how policy and science comes together to form ethics. And all those conversations were ones that really shaped my worldview. And so when I got to medical school then at Washington State University, I was bringing all these experiences from growing up in a predominantly white community to going then to college and really assessing what race meant to me and thinking about science and how healthcare was being connected, and then getting to medical school and realizing that they didn't have all the answers when it came to understanding how race was thought about. And I was already talking about these things with my friends, with my peers, but I think the big step that I took to answer your question directly was actually talking about it online. And that really came about because of the COVID pandemic in 2019/2020. When COVID hit, I was in my first year of medical school. And so it was around March 2020. And so I entered pretty early on. We were having people from University of Washington actually come to Washington State University, which is based in Eastern Washington, and talk to us about COVID because one of the first places where COVID broke in the United States was Seattle, Washington, and so my state. And so we were having these early conversations, and I'd already been like dabbling in social media, just posting my journey into medicine. But I started having friends asking me about what is COVID? How serious do you think this is? And I was like, I'm a first year med student. I don't know the answers to any of this. But I realized that the information that I was getting firsthand from professors and researchers that were doing on-hand research of COVID was something that I could share online pretty easily and actually just not even give my own opinions towards it, but say, here's what I learned in school today from people that are doing this research on the ground. But I also started realizing that the way we talked about COVID and race was kind of weird to me. At my medical school, myself and one other student were the first two Black medical students at our school, even though our school had been open for 3 years before. There'd been over 200 students. And we kept saying things like that COVID was more likely to disproportionately impact Black communities. But given my background, having taken all these classes, I knew it wasn't because of anything that had to do with race or genetics. It had to do with what's called the social determinants of health and policies that impacted different communities differently. Whether that's redlining, whether that's being closer to pollution, whether that's not having access to healthy foods or having to be a first-line worker. And so that's why you're actually getting exposed more to people that could have COVID. And I started going online and making videos about things that I wish we were talking about more in medicine, really taking all those lessons from my college years that I had found really interesting, the humanities side of medicine, and posting them online. Because we weren't talking about that in medical school. And I thought it was just as relevant, especially given the COVID pandemic and how it was really highlighting all these disparities that existed.
Yeah. Wow. What a time to be in med school and learn a lot. I won't share too many details about the source of this comment that I'll share, which is probably not all that different than things that you hear. But I think it's important I think I would like to get your thoughts on it. Somebody who is a person at a very prestigious academic medical center made a comment related to AI and machine learning that because as you know, there's no biological basis for race that we can see in our genes or anything of that kind of sort, that race shouldn't be considered at all as it relates to AI or machine learning or all of the tools that we may use over time to build drugs and medicines and help with healthcare. And, I don't know. It puzzled me because I understood what that person was trying to say, but I felt that there was a piece that they might have been missing. How are you thinking about that idea, particularly as it relates to technology? That under the hood, you and I are more different than as two Black men than I might be to some other person, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't consider race, and certainly that's something that the country is grappling with. How do you explain that to people in your videos or just in conversations you have?
Yeah, I love that question. Actually, I have a piece coming out soon, an op-ed in Time Magazine just about that. So I'll kind of give the highlights of it. But the reason I even thought about creating that was because, kind of similar to the way that someone was asking that question, President Trump earlier this year passed an executive order that essentially said keep woke, quote unquote, out of AI, out of artificial intelligence in the federal government. And my piece goes into the reasons why we do need to be thinking about, like you're saying, race, gender, socioeconomics, like all these other things, because race, unfortunately, while it is not real, it's a social construct, the impact of race has real world consequences. And those consequences have been felt throughout history. So the example that I give is about a specific algorithm that uses AI across the United States at hospitals to help risk stratify patients, meaning that when someone comes to the emergency department, we need to figure out who's going to be treated first, who can actually wait a little bit before they get treated. And so many hospitals use AI algorithms. A team from UC Berkeley, led by Dr. Ziad Obermeyer, he's a physician as well, essentially looked at this one algorithm that for some reason, even when a Black person and a non-Black person had the same diagnosis, the Black person was always ranked by this AI algorithm, meaning that even though two people were the same sickness level, the AI algorithm for some reason was saying that the Black person was not as sick. And so they went into it, really were trying to understand why. What they found was that this AI algorithm wasn't looking at the sickness level of a patient. Instead, it was using a proxy, cost of care. And so because we know from the history that communities of color, Black people, are less likely to cost the healthcare system more because of lack of insurance, lack of access to hospitals in specific areas because of, once again, redlining or Jim Crow or hospitals, Black hospitals that were shut down in specific areas, Black people cost less, the healthcare system less. So I always use that example because I think it really highlights succinctly how if we don't understand that race is not the end all be all, right? Yes, race does not exist, but the impact of race has real world consequences because of the way it was created and how it's been implemented and used against specific populations in the United States.
Yeah, that's well said. I'll look forward to reading that piece when it comes out. A lot of the nature of what you've been doing is, as the medical mythbuster, you've been speaking truth to things that are misconstrued. And I think perhaps more recently than even when you started, there are a lot of things that we perhaps took for granted as universal truths that we need to restate and confirm. And I know that's a lot of what your work is doing. Where did you start? Like, where do you go to learn about all of the different history and studies and there are certainly big profile cases like Henrietta Lacks or Tuskegee or something that we may have heard about, but the depth and specificity with which you're able to tell the story about how race has impacted medicine, it doesn't seem like a simple Google search or even a simple med school class is going to get it. Where do you get your information? And as someone who is always seeking truth in this domain, how do you do it? And maybe we can learn something from you that we certainly can't look to other people that we should be able to look to for that.
Yeah. I think like you said, Tuskegee and Henrietta Lacks, those are the ones that a lot of people know about. And my classes in college, media and medicine particularly, that was a great intro to having me understand these specific types of things. But I remember when I learned about them, I kept asking myself, okay, these are the ones that everyone knows about. How many stories are out there that don't exist like that? And really, the way that I find a lot of it is from word of mouth. It's through just like following other people or like being on Twitter, or I go to in-person lectures a lot. And so, for example, just yesterday, I went to a lecture up at University of Washington with Dr. Uche Blackstock, who is a physician who writes about racism in medicine. And she has a new book out called Legacy. Check it out. It's a great book. But she's one of my mentors. And so whenever she speaks, I'm always try and be there. But she had this moment where she was asking people, the audience, about their experiences. And a man stood up and talked about a Supreme Court case that I feel like I should have known about, but for some reason didn't. And so I immediately wrote it down and I was like, okay, I'm going to do more research. I'm going to not just do a Google search, but I'm going to actually go and find the primary source literature, right? And so find out, can I go to a library or can I find a newspaper clipping to actually read about it? And that's actually where I get most of my information from. It's trying to take it a step further than just using Google, but actually then finding out where's that primary source. And I feel like what's been really cool for me is now that I have a larger platform, when I post about something, a lot of people will reach out and say, hey, actually, I know this individual. And so, for example, with Henrietta Lacks, I had an interview with the descendants of Henrietta Lacks just earlier this year that I'll be posting soon online. But that was so amazing for me to sit down and ask them questions that maybe weren't talked about in the book or weren't talked about in a Google search or in a Smithsonian Museum little channel. For another example, I just sat down with Dr. Francis Collins for the season premiere of my podcast, The Dose. And he told me about the moment in 2013 when he found out about Henrietta Lacks's HeLa cells being used and the fact that the family didn't know. That's firsthand real history right there. That hearing from the person, for those who don't know, if Dr. Francis Collins was former head of the NIH for 3 different presidents, both Republicans and Democrats, but also was the lead of the Human Genome Project, which is actually a lot of the work that I do, which is based on thinking about how is race not based in genetics. The Human Genome Project proved that. But so for me, even having the chance to sit down with him, I was geeking out, asking him all these questions. And once again, taking notes and being this is something I can share that I've never heard anywhere else, but I think would be really powerful for my audience. And so it's really trying to find the source material for things, not just taking things at face value or using a Google search, but trying to go a step further to really understand how does history exist and how do we often overlook history that's really important and could be powerful for people to understand, but we maybe just didn't hear about it.
Yeah, that's well said. I had a chance to listen to that episode and it's made me think about how not just the short-term impacts of changes, long-term things. You asked him a little bit about what led to his transition away from the NIH, and he essentially said that the environment and the job is nowhere near what it has been for him for a long time. And it's not just what are we missing now, but we're missing people who would have spent a lot more time and all of their knowledge and expertise compounding and us all benefiting from institutions like that. Those of us who are concerned about where things are now, or do you think we're on point to have like serious concern, or do you think that there's a bit of not just hope for change or for new things, or if you disagree, but is there enough stability in the institutions that we've built that can weather these kinds of differences in politics and opinion, or are people freaking out justified, and we should be concerned about certain things?
I feel like I constantly operate in a state of panic, assuming the worst of everything. And I think that's what makes a good doctor / scientist, is someone who recognizes what can go wrong at any moment's notice. I think we've built, as you mentioned, institutions that have thus far been weathering the storm. Otherwise, things would have fallen much quicker. But I'm getting worried that things are being dismantled in real time very quickly. And for many people, if they ever read Project 2025, or if you've been watching the news, I feel like I watch a little bit too much news. But part of the reason was because even in the last administration, I was a part of this thing called the White House Healthcare Leaders in Social Media. And so I was constantly at the White House, had private briefings with Vice President Harris about reproductive health and disparities there, would talk with different staff members, would be at briefings by the president about things like lowering the cost of care. And I saw the ways that we were making progress. And so I intimately know the things that are being rolled back, and it does worry me. I think where we do have power is the fact that government is not the end-all, be-all institution. There's so many other institutions, especially when it comes to science. And so I think right now, specific societies are thinking, how do we step up? Whether it's the American Medical Association, the American Association of Medical Colleges, or even like things like ACOG, the Association for Gynecology. All these other associations are trying to figure out, if we cannot trust this institution that we've relied on for so long, how can we all come together to create something that we can rely on? Because at the core of it, what an institution is made up of by people, right? And so that institution can be moved and the power can be shifted wherever it needs to go, as long as we have trust. And in medicine, the evidence-based science piece of it. I think what does worry me, though, is the lack of knowing where truth is anymore. And as much as I'm on social media all the time because of my work, I recognize the fact that misinformation and disinformation are increasing in levels that I've never seen before. And as someone that grew up in this internet world, I'm now seeing how propaganda is being put on, how bots and AI are all playing into these narratives of taking away critical thinking skills from people. And if I could do one thing right now, not even related to science, but related to social media, that could I think have this cyclical effect, it'd be to actually teach kids early on, how to spot misinformation, disinformation online. That would be a mandatory class in every single school, from elementary all the way through high school and college, because those are things that we're not taught. And we kind of hint on it when we go take our English classes and we learn about pathos, ethos, logos, all those kind of things. But that same type of thinking needs to now move into the digital world. And I think we're too slow at adapting to that. So to sum it up, I think I am optimistically cautious about the world, and I want to see the best in our institutions, but I also recognize that institutions are made by people and people can fail us. And so we need to find new institutions or new mediums that can actually uphold what's been there for a long time.
Yeah, that's well said. The work that you've been doing since you started posting in a very prominent way on your platforms, it seems to me that you had a lot to teach the White House, have a lot to teach institutions about sharing information and storytelling. And in your time at the White House, did you find that they were on the cutting edge of how you can disseminate information and do so in a trustworthy way that's different than addresses and old school approaches, but are embracing tools that you've clearly leveraged well? Or is this a skill that the government or even AMA and all these other institutions kind of have to catch up with to folks like you to continue the brand and reputation of excellence that they have and expertise, but now present things in different ways? I imagine, is there anyone there that knows anything about this and knows how to do it well? Or do you feel like you're kind of talking to people who couldn't really even understand what you were saying or how to execute as you have?
I feel like in the last year of the administration, they were just starting to get there. And so the Office of Digital Strategy, the President's Office, the Vice President's Office, specifically the Office of Digital Strategy, was kind of coordinating all of it. And they were doing a much better job of trying to figure out how do we actually connect with the American people in a novel way. But I think they didn't go all the way. What they were mostly doing was bringing in content creators like myself to the White House to then report on things, which is great. And so they had, for example, the first ever creator summit last year where they invited 100 creators. I got to speak actually on a panel while I was there, but they brought 100 creators to the White House to really learn from us as a digital strategy what they're doing, to learn more about how we can actually be attempting to like showcase how policy can work for people, which is really important. I think where they didn't do a very good job was actually getting these figures to figure out how they use the medium as well. We know how to do it, but how do you get these people to do it well? And for better or for worse, the Trump administration has been great at it. Whether it's even creating Truth Social, leveraging X and Elon Musk, bringing in Mark Zuckerberg and all these other individuals from tech companies to really better understand how do the algorithms work and how could it work for the presidency. Obviously, I feel like it's being done in a way that's harmful in terms of how they're actually implementing it. But they are doing it very well in ways that haven't been seen before. You look at things like Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk and all those conversations too. The reason it got so big was because he had a massive online following and knew how to leverage the digital world. What we don't have right now is people on, I wouldn't say the left, but like even the Democratic institution understanding how to use social media in a way that's effective and reaches people. And I don't think institutions like the AMA know how to do it very well either. There's a lot of people behind the scenes who are younger and who are trying to say, hey, here's how we actually do it. But it's whether the institution wants to catch up to that. And I think right now we're still in this kind of like catch-22 of the old guard and the new guard trying to figure out how do they work together. And so I think there's a lot of work to still go. I've seen some progress, but I'll see like an incremental step forward, but then it suddenly halts. And part of the reason is it's not easy at all. It's not easy because in this new media world, one, attention is what you're always fighting for, and attention is short. And then two, it's the fact that you always have to be on. You have to have someone that like lives and breathes this in a way to really be able to connect with people in an authentic way.
Yeah. It is the aspiration for many kids growing up now to want to be like you in many respects. Certainly, we hope they want to be like you in the sense that they're excellent physicians and will go on to help a lot of people. A lot of kids also want to be famous and on social media. I guess on a more personal level, what does it feel like to know that millions of people have watched, liked, shared, talked about everything that you're building, and certainly your recognition by Time, your recognition by Peabody, your recognition by Forbes? Do you ever wake up and be like, oh yeah, this is me? Or is it just, yeah, this is business as usual, and now it's just a normal part of your life?
Yeah, I'll say yes and no, in the sense that I think, like, for example, earlier today, I got like a text message from someone and they're like, oh, I like listened to this specific like video and I got into a conversation with a family member. I was like, wow, like, I think I sometimes forget that like it can have impact like that, because I'm going to be totally honest. I don't look at the numbers. I try not to look at shares, try not to look at likes. And the reason why is because like I would be doing this whether I had 1 million followers or 10 followers. And I started this at like 0 followers, right? Like I started doing this because like this was something that I was like, why are more people not talking about this? And like I remember when I was in college, I would see all these people that like famous, like the Kardashians or whatever, or even famous online. And I'd be so upset because I just wish they were like putting good information out there to make me think. Like those are the people that I loved to listen to. I was listening to people like Ezra Klein, or like I was listening to podcasts. I would listen to NPR every single morning. And I was like, why are more people not listening to this to create a more educated, people that are critically thinking, that are not just taking things as fact, but really wanting to dive deeper into the way that the world actually is? And so like when I started getting a following, I was kind of like, this is cool, but I'm going to try not to let it ever get to my head, or I'm never going to be like, and so even if someone comes up to me, like I'll never, like it doesn't feel real to me in a way. Like sometimes people will come up and like, oh, I've been following you since like you started making content in your first year. And I'll be like, cool, I don't care. Like, what's your name? Just tell me your story. Like, I just want to hear your story. And I've always loved just like individually connecting with people in that way. And so for me, I try my best not to think about the numbers or to think about even the accolades. I see them as a cool vehicle to get more people to understand what I'm trying to put out there, which is really making us ask why about systems in the world around us to make it a better place. Yeah, so it's been cool. And I think I remember my siblings were talking to me and my sister was like, oh, you've always wanted to like be well known. And I was like, but I wanted to be well known to make something happen, to leverage it for good, to make And I was actually just thinking about this morning. I was in the shower. I was like, what other purpose is there than to be in this world to leave it a better place? For me, I can't imagine anything else. It's like, why else are we here if we're not going to make it better for those that are here or those that come after? And I love that I get to do this both from the aspect of medicine as a doctor, where I see the one-on-one interactions with people that are houseless coming in, trying to seek services or trying to connect them to food aspects or just getting them the medication they need or educating them about what is heart failure, what is diabetes, what are all these conditions. And then I also got to do this on this fun level of thinking more like systemic level, like big picture thinking. How do we create systems that work for everyone as well? And right now I just feel like blessed to be doing what I love to do, which is creating systems that will work better for everyone and creating a world that can be better for everyone. I think that's very much like the African in me in the sense that everything's about community. And man, I just if I could create a perfect world where everyone was just like happy and we just had a perfect community, that's my life mission.
Well, man, I want to give you your flowers in case you don't get enough people or you don't see them in the comments. Your passion and commitment, regardless of how many people are watching, comes through in everything that you do. So just thank you for the work that you're doing and not just the work that you're doing, but how you're doing it and the example that you're setting to other influencers and other folks who are trying to follow in your footsteps. You start with content on social media. You then launched an animated series and you've got a podcast. You're also a doctor and seeing patients and serving people. What is kind of on the horizon for you? Is it more media projects and more content? Is it less? Is it more of a focus on your clinical work? I feel like the future is limitless for you. What kind of excites you about what the next chapter of what you're doing could be?
Yeah. Right now, I mean, I'm loving residency. I love the learning aspect of it. So I'm focused on being the best doctor I can be. But I've found a nice balance now of both like being a doctor and working, but also being able to still do this content. I think I have incredible teams around me. And so whether that's like my podcast team with the Dose, they're from the Commonwealth Fund and they're incredible at helping me create these. I want to keep bringing these conversations to people and utilizing the things that I'm learning as a resident, because I think it's such a unique time where like the things I'm learning, I'm realizing you see the flaws in the system really well. And so like, I want to be able to showcase those things. I think looking forward, it's doing more media projects and figuring out how do I integrate this more into the conversations is thinking about the intersection of policy, technology, and medicine. And so from the political aspect, obviously there's so much going on in the world right now. Sometimes I'm just like, man, like obviously I love the hospital, but sometimes I'm just like, I want to be out there, like, because I'm just so scared that by the time I finish residency, the world's gonna be a worse place off, you know? But I'm like, no, like I'm happy with what I'm doing right now. Like I see the necessity of it and being able to build something off of that. And so, I mean, who knows? Maybe one day I'll do more politics. Maybe one day I'll do more the media route. I can imagine like starting a media company that really is built around amplifying health disparities or just like science topics overall. That's kind of what I do on an individual level right now. I work with a lot of institutions from places like the Doris Duke Foundation to TED to the AMA to the WMC to even more traditional brands like Google and Vaseline in terms of helping advise where do we go from here, but also creating content for them as well online. And so I've loved all of that. And I think eventually, not now because I'm so busy, but eventually I want to think about how do you scale that and actually build something bigger so that other people can also learn how to do this, whether they're doctors or lawyers or nurses, and that what I'm doing isn't kind of seen as abnormal, but can be the norm for people that want to impact the world along with have a career.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. We'll be watching closely to see and sounds like a lot of exciting things on the horizon.
You mentioned my YouTube show that I have. It's called The Doctor Is In. And the whole purpose for that was to try and get kids that were very young, 3 to 5 years old, to better understand about healthcare, to understand how does blood flow through our heart? You know, how do our kidneys work? What does our liver do? I think the more we're able to understand those things, the more we're able to live longer, healthier, more satisfying lives that improve all of our communities.
Yeah. To wrap up, you know, a lot of what people are going to increasingly hear more about and seem to have great results from are related to GLP-1s, about their, you know, becoming more accessible and cheaper and seeming to have greater results than past initiatives that have been done. What are your thoughts around just everything that has become this like GLP-1 revolution, and now it's something that's might help a lot of people who are struggling with weight or a lot of these chronic conditions? Is it a big part of your practice? Is it something you're talking a lot with your patients, or or do you have any concerns or things that you think people should know about those?
Yeah. I think GLP-1s are really interesting, not even from the perspective of GLP-1s themselves, but how do medications become popularized? Because GLP-1s have been around for a long time, right? When you think about what it is, GLP-1s are what's called an incretin hormone. And so after you eat, your gut naturally releases GLP-1s that helps insulin secretion. And we were using them for a long time for diabetes. But now it's been popularized and seen to work in other aspects of life. And so that's why they're being used everywhere. They originally developed for type 2 diabetes to help control blood sugar. But over time, especially in the past, it's been like 2-3 years now, as people saw that they also have a weight loss anti-obesity effect. And specifically how that works is by slowing down gastric motility. So you feel satiated, you feel full faster. Now it's being approved for these other indications. So I think what's so fascinating about that whole story of GLP-1s is they've been around. We've been using them for type 2 diabetes. Now suddenly, to other people, they're like, oh, doctors, like, do you know about this? We're like, yes, of course we know about this. We give this to other patients for different things. But now they're attracted because they have two benefits. They can help with glycemic control and weight reduction. And there's a lot of other ways that people are seeing that they can be helpful as well, whether it's cardiovascular benefits, metabolic improvements. There's like some favorable side effect profiles. There's the dual benefits I talked about for people that have diabetes, but then also have the weight loss they're looking for. And there's new uses. There's even neuro and cognitive potentials. So I think for me, what I think the important story out of GLP-1s is how do you understand medications and positive side effects of profiles that can be used? And I actually sit on the scientific advisory board for this wonderful company called EveryCure. Run by David Fagban, who actually just recently got Time 100. The company also got on the Time 100 for AI. But essentially what he's trying to do is how can we re-profile medications for different diseases? And his story is that he had this thing called Castleman's disease. It was thought to be uncurable. He found a small study that showed that maybe a specific medication that's used for other things could work for him. It ended up working. And he was a medical student / resident at the time when this was all happening. And so I think there's going to be a lot of interesting use cases for companies like that. We talked about AI and I talked about the negatives of AI, but I think the positives is we're going to be able to now look at use cases like that, use artificial intelligence to better understand how can we take a medication like a GLP-1 and figure out how else it can be used in a positive way. So I know that didn't directly answer your question, but hopefully it broadened it out to show that I think the story of GLP-1s is how can we actually use this lesson to broaden out and figure out where else can we apply this to other parts of the world.
Yeah, very well said. I appreciate you sharing that. Just in wrapping up, anything, you are a voice that we look to with respect and trust. And so whenever we can give you the microphone to speak, we want to make sure that we're listening. Anything else that you think is important for whether it's the Ron Brown community to know or just people to know that we just didn't get to touch on yet today?
Yeah, I think I'll say the three things I always try and tell people. So one, years ago at my sister's graduation, Oprah was the commencement speaker, and she said something I'll never forget. She said that the job you're going to have in the future probably doesn't exist today. I remember I wrote that down in my notes app, and I was like, I'm going to hold on to that. And the lesson I've drawn out of it is that follow your passions. Do the things that you find naturally excite you, and the jobs will open up for you. You can continue on the traditional paths, but just because you're going down a path as a doctor, as a lawyer, as an engineer, whatever you're doing, don't forget that all your other interests can come together in some ways. I never could have imagined that I'd be doing media and having now a digital TV show and getting to speak at the White House and advise the Surgeon General on different things. But these are all things that I naturally found interesting, which was politics, technology, and medicine. I think two, a setback is a setup for a comeback. I think we focused a lot on my successes, but not the failures. And there's been a lot of failures along the way. I was never good at science, at medicine, at all. And I struggled throughout college. I'm not even gonna lie, I broke down in front of my advisors many times saying how could I do so bad on this test? But all those moments made me stronger for who I am today. Never compare yourself to the end result. Hindsight's always 20/20. Focus on the one foot in front of the other and you'll get to where you need to be in the future. And then the last thing I'll say is find those mentors. And those mentors don't always have to be people that are older than you or have to be above you in the sense of further down the career. They can be your peers. Some of my best friends are my mentors every single day, where they're either keeping me honest to the things I should be thinking about, or they're just teasing me or whatever, but it keeps me humble and keeps me realizing that there's so much more to learn in life. There's that phrase that you are the average of your closest friends. Make sure that people around you are uplifting you, that they're people that are constantly encouraging you. I think about my best friends who are now in this space. It's people like Khalil Green, who's known as the Gen Z historian and has done amazing work when it comes to uncovering history, or Wawa Katheru, who's writing Black Girl Environmentalist, was just on The Daily Show, is doing incredible work when it comes to environmental justice. And I think about my medical school friends too, like Athena, who's doing general surgery, or Kenny, who's doing internal medicine, Thomas doing ophthalmology. These are like the people that I look to in my life to really push me forward and keep me thinking about the world around me and keep me grounded. So hopefully those three things are helpful. But I think at the end of the day, you can only follow your own path. And actually, I'm going to add one more because I have to say this. Travel as much as possible. I think travel has opened my eyes. There's this word that I absolutely love, sonder, and it's a word that essentially means like taking like a solace in how small you are part of the universe, but also how big of a part you are of it too. And so looking at someone's life and realizing they have just as vast of a story as your own, I think travel allows you to open your eyes. And my goal is actually to hit every single country. I'm at 60 something right now. So I think travel can open your eyes and just show you things that you never thought were possible. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Value of One, the Power of All, a podcast created by the Ron Brown Scholar Program. If you want to hear more inspiring conversations like this one, don't forget to click subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. To learn more about the organization, check us out at ronbrown.org.